so this should be stolen.
No breaking news. It is 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, so we all know what that means. Another riveting episode of Behind Breaking Bond. Joining me is this guy.
Andy Kahn, Director of Victim Services. And again, because I was told by whoever sponsored the coffee, no bond coffee, that if I hold this up, I get a free bag of coffee. No bond coffee. Good to the last bond.
See, he gets $0 from Fox, so
this is what I have to resort to.
That's what he has to do. It's sad. You're watching this because you obviously care about what we've been seeing with the revolving door at the criminal courthouse. For more than a year now, we've been doing an ongoing series. Breaking Bond airs every night, every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Please be sure to join that tonight. But we've been talking to candidates that are running in the March primary. Joining me right now is Tanya Mclaughlin. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, Rick. Thank y'all so much for having me.
You are running in the 262nd.
I am the Republican candidate for the 262nd. I expect to be on the general ballot in the fall.
What made you decide to run?
I did not take it lightly. I currently have a private practice in criminal defense, which I have had since leaving the DA's office in 2009. But I am, aside from being a lawyer, I am a wife and a mother of 2 young children, and the crime is increasing and the homicide rates are increasing. And in the 262nd, specifically, I was a young prosecutor in that court, and to see that it has climbed to be the district court with the most murders by people on multiple bonds has been really heartbreaking to watch and scary for my family.
Have we ever featured the 262nd?
Yeah, that's Lloyd Chambers Gray?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we have.
Done stories?
Yes, we have.
There, I believe, are currently 11 victims of murder out of her court. I think it tops the list.
Yeah, it's been, I guess, a few months, but we ranked all of the district court judges. And what we're talking about when we say that is they've allowed someone out repeatedly. They have multiple felony bonds. Instead of revoking the bond for picking up a new criminal charge, they just let it continue. While that defendant, in this case, Judge Lloyd Chambers Gray Court, is out on those multiple bonds, they allegedly murdered someone. They took someone's life.
And many of those same defendants were then also released on the murder charge.
That's true. So right now, I've documented 160 people who have been killed by defendants released on more than one felony bond, or they were on a felony PR bond, or they were on bond and forfeited their bond and became a fugitive. And of the 160, 122 since 2020. So far this year, there's 3 that have been documented. And one of the ones that we did out of the 262nd, and we've done several stories, and she's become an elegant spokesperson regarding this issue. And that's Teresa Seck's brother, Patrick Akins, was allegedly murdered. One of the defendants charged in his murder was out of the 262nd. He was on 7 felony bonds. He was on 4 felony bonds in Harris County and 3 felony bonds in Fort Bend County. He had just finished serving a 5-year prison sentence for ag assault with a deadly weapon. He was on an ankle monitor. He was so bad, he had an ankle monitor from both counties, which was absurd.
And something interesting from the perspective of a criminal defense attorney is I keep trying to explain to people that these policies of catch and release and constantly bonding violent offenders, it doesn't help them either. I have clients with 7, 8, 9 bonds, and some of them are very young, and I'm passionate about the young clients. And what happens is they get so many felony cases that they're buried beneath, essentially the system.
They're overwhelmed.
They're not going to be able to come out. And for instance, some of them struggle with substance abuse, mental illness. And if you don't allow them to be in jail for long enough to address these concerns, they just keep coming and going. And so I have found that I'm struggling to resolve cases. My clients can't move on. They can't get better. And so it is something that is affecting not just, the public, but it is affecting the defendants that are dealing with these cases.
Well, we've seen instances where at least twice there's defendants on multiple bonds that they end up dead in police shootouts.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right. We're not, if
You're not,
there's,
as I like to say, we're not doing them any favors
No.
by continuing to spit them out time and time again. And in many cases now they're charged with capital murder cases. Now they're looking at a life or a potential death sentence. So the great example was what happened in the Grotto shooting with the off-duty. He was on 5 felony bonds in 2021. He's 19 years old. And so just like you were saying, did you do him any favors?
Yeah.
No.
And the problem is, I believe the court believes that as long as there's an ankle monitor, everything's fine. But if there's no consequences for violating bond conditions, then bond conditions do not matter.
right. And a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm the defendant. You're telling me, well, you go get it. Well, 9 times out of 10, they don't even go to pretrial services to get the thing, right?
I have an interesting story. I had a client that had an ankle monitor on, and pretrial was notifying me that their ankle monitor, it was off, and I was like, well, that's unusual for this client. I can't get in touch with them. And I started to worry. They were like, well, we can tell it's near a lake. And I was like, can you send the police? And they were like, no, we can't do that. And I go, can you give me the address? And they're like, we can't do that either. And so immediately I'm like, then why are we having ankle monitors?
Personally, I think they give this false sense of security because, like you said, 9 times out of 10, nothing's going to happen if you violate it.
Right.
And if you're leaving it up to the defendant to even pay for it.
Well, and they're not paying for it. That is another issue. The county is paying for.
We pay for it. Right?
Yeah.
And it's very expensive. And when I was a prosecutor, the only people, there were minimal people on ankle monitors, and because there were so few and they were so expensive, it was a deterrent, and there was so few that they were easily monitored.
Yeah, right. Because you'd have to kind of fall into a certain category
Yes.
to even get one, right?
Absolutely.
I'm going to read you something, and then I want you to respond. And this was an email that was sent to me yesterday, and it's regarding the 262nd District Court. I'm just going to paraphrase you. Dear Mr. Khan, I'm writing to this while I sit in a Zoom waiting room in the 262nd District Court awaiting a hearing for the person that's accused in my partner's murder. I've been here since 9 a.m. It's now approaching 1 p.m. I've had no contact from any member of the court. Not surprising, it's not the first time that I've been in this position where I've attended hearings and no one has reached out to me. If a murder victim's family, should they be expecting more transparency or information from the court about the current proceedings? Or how long am I just going to sit here staring into a screen before somebody tells me anything?
Wow.
This was yesterday, out of the 262nd.
Ask anybody that practices in the 262nd regularly. It is a black hole. Their dockets last till 3:30 on a regular day because you spend 2-3 hours just to go in for a reset. There is no efficiency in this court. The cases have piled up so high. There are hundreds of motions to revoke probation that have not been ruled on. And when I say ruled on, you could dismiss it, you could, terminate it, extend it, revoke it, but you have to rule. And so because it is getting so backed up, you just can't get through that court. And so it's unfortunate to hear that it's not just affecting the lawyers and the defendants, but it's also affecting the victims.
What would you do differently if you took over?
Oh my goodness. I have thought so much about this. Well, for one, this court, back when I was in it, it was a training court. It had one of the lowest dockets, and not that there weren't flaws back then.
Sure.
But it had the lowest docket. It was known you were sent there to train, get trials.
That was Mike Anderson.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll take former judges for $200, Alex.
There is no price.
And in that court at that time, I would get a verdict, pick a jury, get a verdict, pick a jury. And unfortunately for whoever is in there, if I'm on the bench, that is what's going to happen initially with the backlog is, Dr. Martin Luther King obviously said it best, justice delayed is justice denied. We have to go to trial. This court, I think, went to the trial for the first time in maybe the last few years. I'll have to double check. Very recently on a sex assault that the jury hung. They've got to go to trial. Those probation cases should not be sitting on the docket for more than a few months. We've got to have hearings. It is not difficult to fix this problem.
Good. And just to make sure, you're not in the primary, you're running against Judge Lloyd Chambers Gray in the November election.
Yes, because I am unopposed in the Republican primary. I will be on the primary ballot, but then I will be running directly against the judge in the fall.
And I want to make it very clear, Judge Lloyd Chambers Gray, we would be more than happy to have you come on this. We're not going to bombard you with questions. You can say whatever you would like to say. Tanya Mclaughlin, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll try to have you come back before the November election.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Good luck to you.
Thank you all for
You bet.
everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Before you leave,
Yes.
Facebook viewer writes, great job bringing this to light. Great job to all of you, three of you.
Oh, thank you so much. That makes all of this.
Thank you to my brother who put that up there.
And for the coffee.
Shout out to Andy's brother. No, seriously, but before you go, I'm because we've talked about this, and you're so correct that I think there's this idea of let's help these young men kind of get, and everybody wants to see that. No one wants to see someone, spend their life behind bars, but we're not helping them when they end up getting overwhelmed with all these criminal charges.
17, 18, 19-year-old defendants, they're a lot of times just babies.
Yeah.
They need the justice system, when they get wrapped up going the wrong direction, to come in and put it to a stop and find out what's going on. How can we make that better? And the answer is not 9 felony cases.
That's right. Tanya, thank you so much.
You bet.
Now we're going to bring in Andrea Bell.
This is kind of pretty cool. This is like the Tonight Show where we bring in another guest, that.
You're Ed.
So we bring in another guest.
I'm ending there.
Do we have anybody else? Let's go find others and just.
Hey, one of these days we'll have like a live audience.
Maybe more exciting guest than judicial candidates.
It's not possible. This young lady here Andrea Bell is going to look familiar to a lot of people because you've been on the news a few times. You're a prosecutor and you've been behind some pretty high profile cases.
Yes, I currently work as a child fatality prosecutor. So I'm one of the 2 chiefs that handle all of the cases in Harris County where a child under 14 has been abused and murdered.
You are running against 185th Jason Wong.
Yes, I am.
What made you decide to run?
Well, I looked at the court and I had previously practiced in the 185th, and I just saw what was happening to the docket numbers. We have a lot of hardworking Democratic judges who've done a good job at going to trial throughout the pandemic and Harvey, but the 185th, that's just not the case. He's been to trial 10 times in 3 years.
That's unbelievable.
Yes.
I mean, what you're doing, we've talked about this before, is really pretty unusual. It's kind of rare when you have someone go against somebody in the primary, their own party, against an incumbent.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely not easy to go against an incumbent, but I looked at what was happening in that court, and it's not functioning the way it was meant to. I mean, the legislature prioritizes certain cases, for instance, cases where a child under 14 is the victim, and he hasn't presided over a single child abuse case his entire tenure on the bench, and currently has 29 of these cases set for trial. Sexual assault of a minor cases set for trial. So it's not like the trials aren't there to try.
Yeah.
They're just not being tried.
What would you do differently?
I would go to trial. I know that we've been through a lot as a county with COVID and Harvey, but at the end of the day, the way that the wheels keep turning is through trials. And our county leadership created the NRG situation. And while that wasn't extremely popular with the bar, it was a way to keep going.
Yeah.
And we're now transitioning back into the courthouse. Some judges have tried 30, 40 cases. And so we can do better than what's
Do
happening
you
right
find
now.
when people are out on bond, what we're seeing right now for more extended periods of time than they've ever had before, that it kind of reduces, for example, settling a case, a plea bargain, because they're out 3 or 4 years? Does that make it more difficult for you to try a case when they've been out that long, which is a lot of these cases now,
Yeah.
right?
Right, it is. Yeah, and bond wasn't meant to exist for
Right,
4 or 5
yeah, you weren't
years.
supposed to be on bond for 2, 3, 4 years.
Right.
That's not the whole idea of it.
Right, and you shouldn't be in pretrial custody for 4 or 5 years either, right?
Exactly.
We need to make sure that we're working hard in getting these cases to trial, but it's, we don't want to have people sitting in pretrial custody just to create a plea mill, obviously.
Right.
But no, I mean, it's the judge's job to say, hey, you've had sufficient time in this case to bring it to trial. And while that might not make you everybody's friend, you do need to hold both sides' feet to the fire to make sure we get these trials going.
One of the things that I've started to notice, and let me get your perspective on this, and we did a Crime Stoppers press conference a little over a month ago. The guy that was on multiple human trafficking charges and sexual assault of a child, he was out on bond, and he showed up for trial the first day. And then obviously he didn't like what he saw and said,
Left.
bye-bye, I'm not. So the jury in absentia sentenced him to 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's still a wanted fugitive right now. So, and I said, this is going to probably be the first of many as some of these cases actually start proceeding to trial, because you've got people who are out on bonds for very serious offenses like capital murder, trafficking, that are looking at a lengthy prison sentence. I just want, what do you think about how can we address this issue with?
Well, I think we need to look at what the purpose of bail reform was originally for, which was to ensure that we weren't creating more disparity between the classes. So you don't want, I'll use Robert Durst as an example, right? You don't want Robert Durst with all of his resources out on all of these murder charges, killing more people, while you have Joe down across the street who has a drug problem sitting in pretrial custody when he's not hurting anyone but himself, right? And that's not what's being done in the 185th. 40% of the people in pretrial custody in that court are there for nonviolent offenses. We need to take, and there are people who are out on bond for multiple charges. So we need to be more diligent in saying, hey, what is the community safety factor and where does that come into play? Because the code dictates that we need to take that into account.
Isn't that kind of one of the most important things, is to look at it from the public safety standpoint? Is the public going to be safe if I grant this person bond?
Right. There are 5 factors. And I think the 2 most important, arguably, and I think anybody would agree, are that it not be used as a tool of oppression, and that we keep the community safe as well as the victim.
One of the bills that failed would have gave judges discretion, keywords, discretion, in not granting bond to defendants charged with certain violent crimes. And this somehow, would that be something as a judge that you would support having discretion? Because what we hear from judges is their hands are tied.
Yeah, we have to
have to
no other
grant a
choice.
bond, and the only exception of being is capital murder, and they're not even doing that anymore either.
So right now, judges do have the discretion
Yeah.
to raise or lower bond for any just cause, and that's not defined through the case law. But they don't need a hearing if the surety isn't is defective, which we're seeing a lot now with these bond amounts that were not intended, or the amount that the bail company is taking. That were not intended
Sometimes
by the
it's
court.
2-3%, right?
Right. We need to look at the code in 17.09 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. It says that a judge sua sponte can make those calls. So the discretion is happening now.
One thing too, I want to point out, we've done the 185th, Jason Wong, in breaking bond segments. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but he too has had defendants who were repeatedly freed on felony bonds that later went on to allegedly kill someone while they were out on bond.
And with the amount of time that people are sitting in that court waiting for their day in trial, that's not surprising.
And another thing too, you kind of brought this up. It just seems nonsensical to me to let someone out on with capital murder because they are facing the possibility of a death sentence or life in prison. I mean, common sense would kind of tell you, well, just run, right? I mean, it's like, I'm facing two terrible futures. Why don't I just go for it and run off and see, how long I can stay free?
Right. And right now, the Constitution says that in order to hold somebody at no bond on a capital, there are different reasons why you could, but the most applicable one is that you can show that a jury is likely to find the defendant guilty and sentence the defendant to death. And all of the rules of evidence are in play, like hearsay. So we can't just have a cop take the stand and talk about, what the victims told him or what the witnesses told him. We would have to bring all those witnesses into court. So there are some issues. But in some of my cases that you highlighted earlier, where a child has been egregiously murdered, I have been seeing bonds that are at $1 million. So
Would you say that's recently or within? I'm seeing a lot of higher
Recently.
bonds
Right,
now.
yeah, yes, yeah.
And maybe I'm a little cynical, but that's just because of my New York upbringing on that. But I have seen things astronomically change since an election cycle began. Now, you've been a prosecutor how long?
7 years.
Okay. We go back and we sit and we talk and we go, I can't remember so many people out on capital murder bonds. And so you, as a prosecutor, have you ever seen anything like this up until recent years?
I haven't. And again, I think it's about ensuring that we have judges on the bench who are working hard to get these cases through the system quickly. And again, we do have some of those. We have some very hardworking judges, but we have others like the 185th where they aren't going to trial, and it's putting our community at risk.
If
I'm
you're
not 100% sure this is answerable in a short amount of time, but Facebook viewer Carolina asked, what do you all think about Commissioner Ellis's proposal today, eliminating cash bail entirely, suggesting release depends on risk entirely, instead of who can afford to pay like they do in Jersey?
So I will say that the federal system is set up this way. It has done away with the cash bail system where you look at the risk. It's presumed that someone will get out, but then they take community safety into account and just determine whether someone is in custody or not while their case is pending. And I do think that I can't comment on legislation, but
Sure.
I can say that right now, the way that our code is set up, it's not set up to support a system like we see in the federal system. I think that would have to go through the legislature.
So you don't think that could, I mean, in your opinion, that really couldn't happen unless we had a new law addressing it?
Right, because the Code of Criminal Procedure is pretty clear on what we take into account with bonds.
Remember to vote March 1st primary, Tuesday, March 1st. Remember Andrea Bell. She's running against 185th Criminal District Court Judge Jason Long. Judge Long, again, please feel free, contact us. We'd like to have you sitting here to say whatever you want to say.
And we'll give you a free no bond.
Nobody
back.
gets any free anything. Ignore that. Hey, thank you so much. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
don't we have
appreciate
to promo what we're doing tonight?
Yeah,
See, I have to prompt.
he knows more
Prompt.
about, I studied television in college. He knows more about TV than I do. No, be sure. I'm not, this is not my normal hype.
This is a plug.
Be sure to join us at 9:00 tonight for Breaking Bond, because it is, would you say, in a way, I think it's the most crazy one or headline grabbing one we've done.
What we're going to show you tonight is really going to shock you and just blow you away, because it blew us away
Right.
when we stumbled upon it at 11:37.
Right, yeah. We kind of kept going back. Are you sure?
No, trust me, you're going to want to see this.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for watching Behind the Breaking Bond. Watch Breaking Bond tonight at 9, Fox 26. Thank you so much. Bye.
No more guests.
Hold on one second.
Oh.
I can't